Welcome to the Symbolic Lodge of Conversation, where consciousness and curiosity interweave into discussion. This is All Square Podcast, collabing with my brother from another mother, John Majerowski, host of UFOs on the Level. We brought an exciting guest here in the Symbolic Lodge of Conversation. He's a veteran. He's been a Mason off and on for over 20 years. He's an author on 2 amazing books, and we're going to learn more about the Emerald Tablet and how it's not as above, not as below. This is the story of my brother, of our brother, John Gilbert. John, thanks for being on the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. The studio's great. I love your show, and I love what you're doing. I really believe what both of you guys are trying to do. I believe in that, trying to get these messages out, trying to talk about Masonry to a broader audience. John and I, we did a podcast. Yeah. It's been a little bit of a time ago.
Yeah,
I think,
it was a few months ago. Yeah,
a few months ago. I think I love the feedback you got online from people who are really interested. Someone said, "Hey, you need to. Why is this guy not done an audiobook?" And I said, "Yeah, great question. I just haven't had time." But I think it's great. And I think it does get it out. And I'm sure that person was not a Mason. I think that's exactly what we're trying to reach.
Yeah.
So yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's
great.
Appreciate you driving all the way up here to be with us. We've been talking about doing a collaboration episode because both John and I have been on each other's podcasts. We both were inspirations for each other. Right. And then with Michael Liu and his magic behind the scenes, making things happen.
Yeah. So, gotta have it.
John, you were a man before you were a Mason. I want to hear what led you to knock on the door.
You know, it's an interesting question. And the first time someone asked me that, and I'll give you that answer. I really don't know. It was a very strange point in my life. It was after 9/11. Obviously, I'd been in the Army for a little while. I signed up right after 9/11, and I just got more and more curious about just how it all works. You know, life, if you want to call it, the world, the cosmos. How does it all work? And I got to a point where secrets irritated me. I wanted to know the secrets, whatever those secrets were. I started working in intelligence right around that time. And a lot of doors open, a lot of veils are lifted, and you're like, oh, that's how that works. And it just became a thirst. And it's a foggy memory, but I'm quite sure I just got online and I just sort of came across Freemasonry. I was like, oh, I remember hearing about this. Didn't really know of any family members who were Masons. Didn't really know a lot about what it was. I always had sort of an esoteric bent. I was always into things like tarots and things like that, and kind of studied on my own and in small groups. But I thought, what's this Masonry thing? So I called them. I think it was a call or an email, and they said, get a hold of us, and I did. And the next thing you know, I'm taking my degrees at Paw Paw Lawton Lodge number 25 in Michigan, in Paw Paw, Michigan. And the experience was, as most of us know who've done it, the experience was a combination of eye-opening, but also it felt like memory. That's a very strange thing. I thought
we talked about that. I felt the exact same way.
We did. Yeah. And, there's all kinds of, symbolic things, grips and signs and stuff, and anybody can read that stuff online. But when you actually experience it, it felt like I'd done that before.
Mm-hmm. Like I was home is the feeling I got. Like I felt like I was home.
Yeah, home feeling.
Yeah, like a homey kind of feeling.
And then met great people who understood like what that feeling was. And very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, how old were you at the time when you got into Masonry, and what led you into the esoteric journeys of symbolism and understanding that made it feel so memorable?
That's really great question. So I got into Masonry. I was in my 30s and getting into Masonry because I was a little bit older, joining the Army. I'm 52 now, and I got in Masonry in 2005. I think that's when I was raised a Master Mason. Beforehand, if you want to dive right into the weird stories, I'd always been interested in, the esoteric. Like, how does this really work? And, I had forgotten for years. I only recently remembered in the last couple of years. I remembered that I had a near-death experience when I was 3.
Okay.
And, let me tell you, there was something rather than nothing. Let's put it that way. And there's lots of NDE videos out there, and you can see people's experiences. And they aren't always a great experience. Mine was, the experience itself wasn't necessarily good or bad, but when I recovered from the experience, when I was all well again, I was sort of angry. I was an angry child. I was an angry youth. I was rebellious. It felt uncomfortable just being in my own skin. Just really kind of a troublemaker for a long time. And I didn't really know why that was for a very long time. It was only a recent memory. I was like, oh, it started right there at the NDE. I think the problem is you sort of, how you can feel the difference between being awake and sleep, right? Right now you're awake. I stayed up a little bit too late last night. Mistakes were made.
Yes, yeah. Well, that was a good time.
Libations were had.
It's my fault.
I do not know if I'm awake or asleep right now, but generally you can tell, and that's a very subtle feeling. You can't put your finger on how you know you're awake right now. What if you woke up again for a brief time to another awakeness, and then you had to come back to this? You'd feel trapped in a dream.
Mm-hmm.
And I always felt like that. I didn't have a way to articulate it. I was too little.
Yeah.
And no one understood. And that was when I really first felt like, man, something's different here. But then I always yearned to understand what was happening generally around me. And I got into, I think when I was a little kid, I was always like making up little rituals and doing stuff. I was really into symbolism. Got into the concept of yin and yang like real early. I was probably 9 or 10 years old. I started interested in that, interested in Eastern philosophy.
Okay.
Very strange. And it wasn't until I read an Eastern book, a real Eastern philosophical book, the Bhagavad Gita, which is sort of in Hinduism, and Hindus out there can correct me. I'm not an expert in Hinduism or Hindu mythology, but in Hinduism, there is this very beautiful short text. It's almost like Psalms, and it's called the Bhagavad Gita, or the Song of God. And I was looking into Buddhism, and I was reading modern books on it, but I finally read the Bhagavad Gita, and it had an introduction by Aldous Huxley, who talked about the perennial philosophy, the recurring philosophy. A lot of viewers will be familiar with that. But this idea that we see the same concepts show up across multiple religions, multiple philosophies, and across multiple epochs. We see sorely similar themes that, number one, we're not really in the real reality. Number two, there is some other reality that this comes from. And three, there's a way back to it, right? Yeah. Religion, to bind back,
sure,
right? To get back to the original. And I picked up the Bhagavad Gita, and it was the first book that really spoke to me in religious and philosophical tones. Like nothing had really ever, the words never really leapt off the page on anything else I'd ever read before. And I was probably in my mid-20s, early 20s, mid-20s when I read that, and I said, oh my God, they're saying stuff that I've been thinking and I couldn't articulate, and they wrote this thousands of years ago. This is nuts. And so I think that was the turning point, and that really got me really overturning all kinds of stones and just looking into anything esoteric, and I had really no direction or anything.
It would, could we say that it would put you in mind of kind of Carl Jung's collective unconsciousness with symbolism and how everything has a universal symbolism?
I would say I didn't know enough about Jung at the time, sure, but yes, I would agree with that. That I had this inkling. And I have to interrupt myself. As we were discussing in the car earlier, I wasn't a very good student.
Well,
and I didn't have the discipline to really study like I needed to in anything. I was just kind of like show up at school, take tests, go home. I was in the cars. I was into swords and cars and girls. Yeah. The usual.
Yeah.
Who isn't?
But so I knew vaguely about Jung. I knew vaguely about some of these things, but I had this inkling, this impression that symbolism is where it was at. I was like, symbolism, it seemed to me that the symbols I was studying and the symbol sets pointed to something that wasn't them. Some symbols have a meaning, right? They have an intrinsic meaning. Some symbols point to something else that is indescribable. And I was just starting to get a whiff of that. And I think that actually pointed me towards Masonry, maybe unconsciously.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, it's a weird journey. I wish I could, I was keeping notes on it back then. I'd be like, I would have this heck of a journal, but I wasn't.
Well, I mean, the NDE thing, ties really back into ufology. I think we talked about this before as well. And I think it's getting bigger now, more noticed, but there's a lot of people that are experiencers. So experiences with non-human intelligences that actually, or actual craft, UFOs, orbs, whatever in the sky that are have gone through a near-death experience. And the number's quite staggering, believe it or not.
Would that be in the same plane of existence or in like a altered state of plane of existence?
All of the above.
Really?
So it's interesting to see that. There's a guy I know that actually kind of helped me start down my podcast journey who I didn't know. And he only came out, about it recently publicly, past year or so, but he had I think it was a car accident, near-death experience, and he saw basically angelic light beings. And then after that, his whole entire life has been filled with like legit craft, sky, other things, like multiple people's family saw him. And like before that happened, it was almost like a switch turned on. And so it's interesting to see that there's a definite correlation, not only for that, but just maybe just the high strangeness as well, synchronicity, symbolism, like all those things kind of, it says like a doorway. I think it's a doorway it's opening.
Oh,
maybe.
certainly.
That's well said.
Yeah,
because you hear near-death experiences, and I believe Netflix had a limited series on people who went through near-death experiences, but they also tie it in with outer body experiences.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I had never tied these two together in my mind, because when you're 3 or 2 or whenever this happened, you don't know what's supposed to happen in the world. What's not. You're new to the cosmos, right?
Right.
So everything is new. Like just waking up in the morning sometimes with a itchy foot, that's new. You're like, oh no, what's that? And so my first out of body experience happened spontaneously, and it was just months after my near death experience, and I remember it distinctly. I mean, it's just one of my memories, and I discussed it with my family, and they were like, I don't know what you're talking about. I was little. I was a bit, I don't know, I was a little scared. I was walking down this hallway. My mom was taking me down this sort of dark hallway at the house. I was supposed to stay in my brother's room, just go to bed. It was bedtime. And I remember, now everything is, if you went back to that house, everything's tiny. I thought it was like this huge, dark corridor full of demons. And it was, from me to you. Right?
Sure.
So I go in there, and I fully expected my brother to be up in the bed. We were just little kids. And I remember, the bed was pretty high because I was little, and I remember putting my hands up, and I slapped the bed mattress to push myself up. And at the moment I slapped the mattress, I saw that my brother wasn't there. And there was kind of a shock. And in that moment, I was above myself, up in the corner of the room, looking down on myself. And I thought, well, that's odd. But it didn't freak me out because I didn't know any better to be freaked out. And I remember kind of like willing myself to look over the other side of the bed. I saw some shoes there, some brown shoes. I remember them. And then my mom came in, and bam, I was back in my body. And I tried to explain what happened, and I didn't have the language.
So just to be clear, you were not on the bed. You were not in a meditative state or a state of wakeness and sleep with your body, like a sleep paralysis. Nope. And you just came out of your body in an OBE experience.
Yeah, it was nuts.
Wow, I've never heard that compared to astral projection, where people do that in their sleep and they're connected to tethered to their body.
Yep. And I had done it, and those shoes were there on the other side of the bed. Once I went and looked, I was like, oh, they are there. So I literally saw the stuff that was there, and I think this gets to a deeper question too. Like a lot of this is dismissed out of hand, and I'm a scientist, at heart. I mean, I teach computer science. My wife's a physicist. We're a science family. I'm a fact-based person, but I think what's happened, and maybe not just Western culture, but that's all I can speak for, is a discounting of the individual experience in favor of shared experience. So we have a shared experience, right?
Right.
Like we're all in this room, and there's this ashtray here. We can all agree on that. And so that's pretty verifiable. But we all have individual experiences, even when they're supported by data, even when they're supported by corroborating evidence. They get dismissed if it's an individual experience. Subjective is almost a dirty word. Like, well, that's just subjective. Kind of like in court, they say, well, that's just circumstantial evidence. Well, circumstantial evidence is the most of the evidence that convicts people. If you shoot someone and walk out of the door with a gun in your hand, and there's no one else around, and someone sees you, you're probably going to jail. But that's just circumstantial,
right? I'm rolling this in my head as you're talking about it, because everybody wants to give credit to the scientific method, but that is like one view, one path to find the answer on things.
Well, Hawking and I can't remember. He was collaborating with someone and wrote an article. He said that it's probably not complete. Like we have we built a scientific method, which is amazing. Okay. but we never took into consideration of what it means to understand the information. It was just sort of understood that your scientific method is outside of you, and then you conduct all your analysis, gather your data, you come to some conclusions, and then you understand something. And it's clearly better to understand something than not. That's the only thing you have to take on face value. Well, you can even demonstrate that too, it's argued. But what does it mean to understand something? That's a subjective experience. And he was positing that there might be a part of the equation missing. And it's interesting that in thousands of years of philosophy, we're only now starting to develop, in our lifetimes, a philosophy of consciousness. The one thing you know is true, the only thing you can know is true and experience directly, your consciousness, is only now starting to be looked at like, well, how big is consciousness? Where does it end? The mind stops where yours begins. Like, I'm not in your consciousness. So they're starting to describe it. There's people out there, Tononi, he's a neuroscientist. He's doing really great work in neuroscience and philosophy on consciousness, integrated information theory, I believe it's called. There's great strides being moved forward now. And I would say a friend of mine, Lonnie Watson, who's a philosopher in the UK, she's developing a philosophy of questions, which dovetails into this idea of we've never really considered in scientific method, is there a philosophy of asking the question, and is there a philosophy of understanding the question? We really haven't done that. There's so much more to discover and so much more to understand in the world out there, in the work of people like Lonnie and Tononi and
Sure.
and these guys. You know, they're out there really working. There's way more to come in this. Certainly.
That's really exciting to talk about, because it keeps resonating in the back of my head when you said when you were younger in that house, going down that hallway, which was dark and scary, and the altered state of reality in your consciousness at that time would probably be different than if I was in the same age going down that.
Yeah.
So understanding that consciousness is not just a similar experience for all, and it can be altered, because you've heard people perform, and this is not in Masonry, this is in other esoteric schools or magic rituals that are not tied to Masonry. People performing like the Abermelin ritual.
Sure.
Right? And Michael will be able to put a disclaimer what the Abermelin ritual is.
It's a long one.
Down there. It's a very long one.
It's a long one to read, let alone perform.
Exactly. There's a great horror movie called The Dark Song.
What a great movie.
What a fantastic. Probably
Go
close.
watch it.
Do not, and Mike put the disclaimer out there, do not try that at home.
Yeah, do not try that at home.
Right.
I wouldn't watch that one with your kids.
No, yeah, don't watch that.
But think about it.
Children.
Yeah.
The woman, not spoiling it, this woman wants to contact her holy guardian angel. And she goes through this old grimoire, this old living spell book, and performs these certain rituals of meditation, prayer, eating, isolation from people. And guess what? We are social beings, and to be able to perform that and wake yourself up and cold showers and all this other, it really portrays it really well. That alters your state of consciousness. That can alter your state of reality. And if I was in there compared to when she goes in there, she might see things that I don't. Yep. Now, would you say, is it real? Well, we need to define what is real, right? Because she might see things through her eyes that I cannot, right? Because of my state of consciousness.
Sure.
So I hope that ties into like what we're collectively talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it does. That's and I don't know, John, if you want to jump in there.
No,
we've talked about this stuff before.
Right. Well, yeah, and then the other part about that is the shared collective experience when you have collective consciousness, through ritual or group meditation, things like that. I mean, things that you get a group of people together. In my mind, I think it kind of amplifies it, right? Just like in any people, church or any type of synagogue, whatever, right? When you're in there, you're kind of, in a way, everybody's doing it individually, but there's that aspect of it, I think, that attaches to the collective consciousness. And then I think that's more of a beacon or more of a, an amplification of yourself, but with another person, which is interesting when you think about it, because we're all collectively sharing the space, but we're not, engaging it in a way that's, to a set goal. If you have that set goal and you have that type of,
Like a
and
focus.
the focus that you could try to do that. And that's where a lot of the early contact, they called it CE5 or, things. Yeah. Same kind of thing, right? Where you have a collective, we tried it a couple times now, right? And we've had success and then we haven't, it just depends on everybody's, mood at the time, right? And
kind of a ritual, right?
Yeah, it is.
You would
Yeah.
call it a ritual. And it's really, we talked about this. You had asked me a question that made me think. You said you'd asked me about the tie-in or that junction between, say, ritual, magic, or occult kind of stuff, and extraterrestrial life,
right?
And I was stumped for a minute. I'm like, well, what would be the tie-in? I'm like, well, if there is one cosmos and one creation, then all beings should be part of it. And if there is a hypostasis or an ether or an astral plane, well, pretty much all beings should be on that. And there are some ancient writings that talk about that too, that talk about talking to beings from far away elsewhere in the universe. Some of those writings are modern and purport to be antique.
Ancient, yeah.
So, there's several of them out there, but some of the ancient ones do talk about space travel and other beings who are not just necessarily angelic or in some other plane, but in our world. Just you can contact them.
Absolutely.
And if they're a conscious being, why not? They're part of the same cosmos,
right?
Part of the same system. You would assume the physics is the same everywhere, but that's a huge assumption, by the way. In physics, we haven't really measured that, but we assume that the physics is the same across the universe, right? So,
I often like to think about. There's times when I'm thinking of like friends. John Majerowski, all of a sudden John's calling me, or I call John and John's like, Rob, I was just thinking about you. I think there is shared collective consciousness in that, especially when you tether friendships, relationships.
Right.
And that happens in Masonry. And Masons don't even get it, because I could meet a guy, I could be in Jackson, Mississippi in an airport, and somebody sees a hat I'm wearing or a ring, and that guy sees me. We don't know each other, but we know each other because we walk through those same steps. We understand. And there's that sense of comfortability.
Sure.
Right. And the opposite can happen for somebody that's was exposed in a negative way.
This synchronicity is how I got back into Masonry after a long demit, and we can talk about if you want to get into that.
Yeah, I mean, I was, we were right now, you're just officially raised, and then, lead us how it was, just so we can follow the story.
Well, I'll tell you what, after the raising, and like you mentioned, Freemasonry doesn't have a praxis. It's not a ritual magic thing.
Right. Magic. There is ritual and ceremony.
It's not like you go home and now you have this Masonic practice you do at home and you have all these prayers and rituals. It's just not like that. So one of the guys at the lodge told me right after I've been raised, I'm still humming from, the initiation. And he said, have you ever heard of Walter Leslie Wilmshurst? And I'm like, no. He said, go online and read Walter Leslie Wilmshurst. He said, remember that, Wilmshurst. Oh, okay. I went and read Wilmshurst. I read Meaning of Masonry and was blown away. And it was this esoteric dive into Masonry, because I had experienced all the Masonic rituals at that point, but it never clicked that it really had anything to do with all these other things I had experienced and practiced and things before I became a Mason. Wilmshurst, whether it's right or wrong, whether you believe him or not, he really tries very hard to describe Masonry in these esoteric terms. What's the meaning of the rituals? And that's why I went. I mean, it's really hard to read. If you go out there and read the original, I recommend reading it. There is some language and, shall we say, cultural ideas that did not age well.
Okay.
But read it nevertheless. And now it's difficult to understand, and so I rewrote it, and the book is out there. It's called Temple of the Masonic Order, and all I did, not taking credit for any of his work, I updated the language, so some words they just don't have the same meaning anymore,
right?
And you have to sort of correlate the meaning. So I updated it and then organized it, because his original book was a collection of 5 papers, so they kept starting and stopping in the same place, and it makes it annoying to read. And I talked to a lot of Masons, especially entered apprentices, and they were recommended to read Wilmshurst, and they said it was like being hit over the head with a stick. And I'm like, I get it. So I said, let's write it in an easier to read way. I'll tell you what, that was another turning point book. That was important. That made me really start looking into the deeper meanings of Masonry and Masonic symbols.
Yeah.
And what the rituals were all about.
Well, one would make an argument that the rituals we do in Masonry, the initiatic ritual of the boy becoming the man, right, or the outsider being accepted into the society, the opening and closing of a lodge is definitely a banishing ritual, because we do a prayer, because this is our sacred place. This is our own. This is my words only. Eden. It's our place where we can be men. It's our own think tank. It's where we can talk and really build relationships, to learn, to really subdue all the problems that we deal with, and, just be an example out there for the world.
Right? In Wilmshurst's view, and it's a view, and it doesn't conflict with that view necessarily, is that the lodge room, the way it's set up, which anyone can go see, by the way, just if you're a non-Mason, go contact your local lodge.
Yeah.
Set up a tour. They'll show you everything. They'll let you sit in the master's chair in most of them.
Yeah.
It's not a spooky place, but the way the lodge is set up and the rituals conducted there are intended to be simulacra of your mind, of your psyche. When you set the tiler at the door, that's a guard with a sword, right? It's all symbolic. And you close that door. Now you're shutting yourself to the outer world, and you're turning inward. Now, I won't go through all the steps of the rituals, but when you are doing the certain movements and talking to certain people, and certain people have certain lines, it's, according to Wilmshurst, it's a simulacrum of a psychological activity happening inside of yourself to transcend the material world, as one would say hermetically, to transcend the zodiac, as they call it in the ancient texts, to achieve a transcendence. Someone could call it Christ consciousness. Some people would call it maybe just enlightenment. Masons would call it making good men better, right? In a way. And that's not a moralistic statement. I mean, on its face, it's about morals and morality, but in its deeper meanings, according to Wilmshurst, this is a deeply spiritual internal alchemy inside your mind. You're moving the furniture of your mind around and reorganizing it. Every ritual you do, you're taking symbols that maybe are latent or you at least recognize inside yourself. You put them outside of you so they're easily recognized. A person represents something. There's a symbol on the wall. There's a picture of something and some objects. You reorganize them and then you internalize them again. And that is a ritual. You do it with tarots. If you can do like, future telling, fortune telling with tarots and things like that. But there's an initiatic quality to some of them too. And if you set these abstractions out in front of you in a certain pattern, according to a certain logic, and then you're rearranging them, and then you put them back in the deck, you're re-internalizing that. You're taking ideas, and this is Jungian, I would say. You're taking these symbol sets, you're arranging them according to a set of rules, and then you're re-internalizing them, and it changes you. And that's what initiation is, I think. At its core is a changing of the person by rearranging the internal furniture.
I love that.
That's a really good analogy for it.
Yeah, because, when I use tarot, I'm trying to talk to myself, my subconscious self, and internalizing. I write a question. I'm moving the cards around. I write a question. Because I'm thinking about that question as I'm moving. And then I'm cutting the deck so many times. And then I turn over the card. And I don't just look at it. I look at it and internalizing what I get. And I'm writing it down, and I'm trying to, internalize what it's meaning to me. Because the future, you can do past, present, future readings, and you can do fortune telling, but the future's subjective. It's depending. I could go out that window behind over there. I could go out the two different doors. I'm going to have a different experience every time. So the future, only the divine knows what the future has in store, because it knows everything that's going to happen. But it's up to us to be able to decide. And that's where free will comes into place, in my opinion.
You're talking about the layers of say, a magical system or a symbolic system. Let's call it a symbol set. whether it's Masonic or Tarots, or if you're, whatever organization you're in, you get a set of symbols, and then you operate those symbols. That could be anything from communion and prayer to tarots, and not to offend anybody, putting anything on any level with, not making any like equivalences there, but at a in a very mechanical way of speaking, you operate those symbol sets in order to get some. You're trying to change something, and there's layers of it. I think to some people, it's when you start out, maybe it's you're just trying to understand the symbols. You're trying to learn the symbol set. Some people are trying to, maybe at another level, trying to get a physical effect. They're trying to do something intercessory or fortune telling. And some people are trying to do an internal alchemy of sorts. You're trying to become better or transcendent. So you can take these symbol sets and probably use them for many things. I'm not saying one's better or worse. I'm just saying that that's probably what happens. You see people doing that a lot in their practices.
The thing that ties into UFOs, I think, well, at least ufology and things in the sky that you don't understand, I think it's part of that as well. I think it's part of the awakening of that part inside of you. I mean, I don't think UFOs is a machine in the sky. For everybody, it's different, but I also think it may be a mechanism symbolically to awaken you to a different experience, right?
Well, it could be, and I'm purely speculating,
right.
Because I'm not an expert on any of that.
Yeah.
That if you have beings who maybe have a more advanced, or let's call it just a different consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Time might appear different to them. What was that movie where they had that? Was it Contact or something like that?
Jodie Foster and
the aliens had a language that was so incomprehensible because it had a time component to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was very clever,
right?
Because we look at other life on this planet, and obviously other beings have consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
We see it all the time. We have if you have a dog, it reacts to you. It loves, it hates, it does all kinds of stuff. And it would be weird to think like, oh, well, it doesn't the lights aren't on inside of that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the only one who have the lights on. Well, they do, but it's different.
Mm-hmm.
And how look back to your childhood, how you perceived things, how you thought you were, and how the world was completely different. And we're not just talking knowledge. We're not just talking what you knew, but how you knew it, like how you felt in the universe, how big your universe was, what it did. You felt completely different at 3 or 4 years old than you do now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing to say that ours is the pinnacle. So there could be beings that have just a profoundly different, and in fact, if the earth is any indicator, any being we run into should have a profoundly different view and a profoundly different experience of itself. I would say there's millions and millions and millions of species on this planet. They probably have a profoundly different view of themselves and interaction and experience of the universe. If you go off planet, absolutely. It won't be just green versions of us.
Yeah. Of course.
So, I mean, I'm no expert on that.
No.
But it's certainly an interesting exercise to stretch your mind out there and think about, and, would they be more power? We always think in terms of power and exchange, but powerful, not powerful. It just might be that they see time, or they might experience good and evil differently.
Right.
Which I'm a big fan of. I've always looked at the existence of evil. If you want to jump into another subject, I'm a big fan of Jakob Brahma, a 16th century German philosopher. He talks about the feeling, the sense of good and evil is simply being derived from time, which I happen to think is very satisfying. He explains it like this. If God or Providence, the creator, is a unity, not differentiated from anything else, to experience anything, it's like spreading that unity, that to have you and me separate, having duality. It's like spreading that eternity across something, and that's what we experience at the time, almost like spreading butter on bread. So we're going to experience the entirety. We're going to experience the unity, but in different times. Some of it's good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. And our lives are like that. We're buffeted and carried between these ideas of good and evil. And some of the things we think are good don't turn out good, and some of the things we think are evil actually turn out okay. We're very poor at deciding between the two. But Jakob Boehme's idea, and he's got a whole library online you can just get to for free. I can't remember the URL at this moment, but you go on there and you read. It's hard to read. It's really hard philosophical stuff to read. But at its essence, it's like you if you're experiencing no good and evil, you're not experiencing anything. You're experiencing unity.
Hmm.
Whether you call that enlightenment or nothingness or non-existence, whatever, I don't know. But if you take the unity and turn it into creation, of course you're going to have good and evil. It's a function, it's a feature, not a flaw in the system.
John, in ufology, are there certain sets of symbolism that are consciously over and over again seen, and do these certain symbolisms, if there are there, have a meaning behind them of good or evil?
Oh, good question.
Yeah, it is. It's so it's pretty much up to the perceiver, right? The perception of what it is,
Right.
But there are reoccurring themes, I would say. It's for symbology. I mean, like orbs, golden orbs in the sky, orange orbs in the sky, different colored balls of light, right? Is a reoccurring theme. For the longest time, there was disc-shaped lenticular craft, right? So classic flying saucer, right? So that's triangles where there was a definite flap in the late 90s, early 90s actually, of black triangles in the sky. So
would that be kind of like the Phoenix Lights?
Yeah, the Phoenix Lights, that kind of ticks off a couple of those boxes. It was just kind of an orange set of orbs, but some people did say that they did see a massive black kind of triangle boomerang shaped kind of craft at that time. You've seen videos and stuff, but it's mainly just a set of lights, that you've seen. So there's that. And then of course, the gray alien with the big almond eyes and
Sure.
That's another thing that people see. It was like the Whitley Strieber book that kind of shocked everybody. And, that's kind of the image that's on, kids, trapper keepers now. And, there's stickers everywhere. And that's like the iconic thing that everybody expects that to be the alien, right? It's just this gray thing with almond eyes and big head, and it's kind of turned into that.
Which is interesting because an occultist named Aleister Crowley developed this image of the entity he was perceiving. He was in communication. I believe the name was Iowa, and it had similarities of the almond eyes and the head shape and the dynamics. And it was really from that moment that other people started claiming. Now, is that some kind of psychological thing? Like,
well, just
do you ever remember the madness of dancing plague in the Middle Ages, where people were dancing until they passed out and died? Like, that's kind of like a hysteria that maybe our society jumped on in more of a modern time.
Could have been, but I mean, there's cave paintings that are over 11,000 years old of the same type of entities, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Like the statues, eerily similar.
Australia, it was a couple of different places. It's global,
Descriptions of angels, similarly,
yeah. So they
cross cultures,
of course. So it's kind of the same thing. It's things from the sky that we don't understand, basically, and it's always up from above, coming down, and a lot of it's historically giving knowledge, bringing knowledge, something different, something you don't understand. A lot of it, but then you have the other side of that. You talk about good and evil. You have the abduction scenarios, right? Where people,
I was about to say that.
Yeah, where people they're taken against their will. There's reported that they were taken into a craft, experimented on, brought back, and some people said they've plagued their entire lives by these things. Some people have physical evidence. There's other things that have occurred.
What do you think about that? Do you think that's by and large credible?
Well, I don't know. I mean, when you go back to the scientific method, right? You have things that are verifiable, right? There's some things that are like marks on your body. There's
also
things
individual
like
experiences that are similar.
Exactly.
If those of us in this room all experience something not at the same time but experience the same thing, is that any less true than something that was experienced simultaneously?
Right.
There isn't necessarily a universal law or a physical law that says an object or an experience must be experienced by more than one consciousness in order to be true. That's just sort of a convention. So what if we do experience the same thing, but in different places at different times, but it's the same thing?
Yeah.
What if I walk into this room and experience this ashtray, and then I leave, and you come in and experience it, and then you come in and experience it, but we didn't experience it together, so how can we believe each other?
Right.
It was there.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because it's also, I think it really goes back to being the subjectiveness of the whole thing as well. Because you look at it and There's many stories and a lot of UFO lore where there's groups together, maybe even doing the CE5 thing, where I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with you and I'm looking at something and I see a orange orb in the sky and you see something completely different, but we're shoulder to shoulder looking at the same thing, and Rob sees something different, right? It's just completely different when we're looking at it. So I think your perception, depending on the lens that that you have internally, consciously, I could see,
but they would all say there was something.
There was something there, right? Yeah,
Right.
I see an angel. You see an alien.
Culturally, your experience is colored by cultural experience,
of course,
religious expectations and things like that.
Yeah.
Now at 3, I didn't have any of that. I didn't know what an angel was at all or anything. And
Right.
there was something.
Mm-hmm.
There was definitely something there, and and we regarded each other. It was a presence.
Which would be an interesting play if that's the reason why a higher intellectual civilization would want to create some kind of distortion or confusion so that, they can keep doing what they want to do, but you experience it different, and they know how to manipulate it where I experience it different.
Oh, man, we'll screw up our own perceptions. We're good. We're good at that. It'll be like, just let them do it. Let them do their stuff, man.
Let the monkeys do
nuts. It. It's true. And, you said something about earlier. You touched on like how that experience, how like an NDE or something would color, future encounters with you. I think you brought up the Holy Guardian Angel, things like that.
Yeah, in the dark zone.
It was my wife who pointed out. Man, I had my childhood. I was wild when I was younger because I was rebellious, and I did a lot. I engaged in a lot of dangerous activities and dumb activities and things that. Man, if I had to go back and do, I would never do. Let's just leave that at that.
Sure.
Due to statutes of limitations and various things. But there were many times I really feel I should have bitten it, and something came and got me out of it. I'll tell you an experience. I was deployed to Kosovo, and if you don't know where Kosovo is, Kosovo is a tiny, by and large, Muslim country in Eastern Europe. And there was a terrible war in that region. You've heard of the Balkans, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is north of Greece, Macedonia, this sort of area. That it saw, mass graves. It was a terrible war, and NATO and the UN went in with peacekeeping force. So I was part of the 12th rotation of that peacekeeping force, and I was an intelligence guy at the time. I was the collection manager, so I controlled intelligence collection for the Eastern Battle Group in that country. And we were short on manpower, so they sent me out to do things. There were certain things I do. I had to go out and check on things. You had to go check on various locations. They call them NAIs, named areas of interest. You're looking at certain activities. Are there riots going on? Is there anything on fire or anything? And by and large, the country's calm. It's not a terrible place or anything. I really love the place and had really good friends there. So I went out to this one particular place to observe a thing, and that's really all I can say about that. So I'm standing there. I'm on an overlook. It's just peaceful, and I'm by myself. I'm in civilian clothes. I'm in a civilian car. I think I'm in a Toyota Land Rover or something, And I do my observations. So I'm getting ready to go back to my car, and I turn around, and the car's 50 yards away. It's not terrible far. I was like, oh, look, there's a bunch of old sandbags, and oh, there's some old barbed wire sticking out of the ground. Oh, this is an old fighting position from the war. And it's like, there's things called doctrinal templates. Okay, this is how we understand foreign militaries. So you get a doctrinal template. That is a drawing of how your adversary should set up their defenses and do different things. They have doctrine. How do we conduct an ambush? How do we conduct a defense? How do we do these various things? We have doctrines, right? And then I just remembered a page from some Russian doctrinal templates. I was like, oh, this is a motorized rifle company defensive position. And I was like, oh, I'm where the minefield should be.
Oh,
no. And yeah, the war was a long time ago, but every spring we had what was called hand grenade season. So whenever the spring rains would come, all the hand grenades and landmines would wash up to the surface. And, people get hurt about every year there because of that stuff. And we, the American force and the Allied forces, we'd go collect all that. And we go detonate it once a year. We'd collect as much as we could and go blow it up. And if you have PTSD, it's not a great experience.
Yeah, imagine that.
So anyway, I'm standing there and I'm like, well, darn, this is a minefield. How do I get out of this? And I stood there for a minute, and out of nowhere, and I am in the middle of nowhere in the mountains, these two skinny old dogs come trotting up to me down this like kind of worn rabbit path.
Yeah.
And they just circle me and sit down in front of me. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to follow them out. And they got up and led me out of this minefield. And I went back to my car. And as Ace Ventura would say, and a clean pair of shorts. and I went back. Then went back to my base, which was Camp Bondsteel in Kosovo. And my wife was one who pointed out, like, yeah, that wasn't just an accident.
Right.
No. I
wouldn't. And then I look back on the many, many, many dumb things I've done, and the ridiculous, obscenely improbable circumstances that got me out of them.
Sure.
So. What can you say about synchronicity, and what can you say about that? Like, those are things I want to understand. And I think anyone interested in any of this, how can you not be interested in finding out how that works? And you can't just dismiss it out of hand. An experience like that.
Oh,
yeah. Well, just they happen to be in the area. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Where? Like, there was nothing around.
How boring would life be if we all thought like that? Oh, that's just part of life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's worth investigating.
Yeah.
But you had asked about my break in Masonry. So
so we were on the translation of that book, and then
I was in the military, and I went around. So like I said, I was raised to a Master Mason in Michigan. Because I was in the military, I traveled around. I was out in California at Defense Language Institute. Shout out to DLI, also known as Desperate Love Institute. That's a different story. But it is beautiful out there, of course. And I went up to San Jose, and I joined the Scottish Rite there. That's where I first got in Scottish Rite. I'm still a proud member of San Jose Valley. And so I moved to another state. For a while, I landed in another state. I did like you're supposed to as a Mason. You're supposed to transfer all your memberships to your local, Blue Lodge, your Masonic Lodge, your local Scottish Rite Valley, and I won't say exactly where or in what organization and what body, but it was more than once. Immediately, I started experiencing people saying racist stuff. Oh, and I have zero tolerance for that. And I've got a message for other Masons: if you're in an organization that is about universal brotherhood and you're a racist, get out. I'll say it. I don't want you there. You need to change or get out. It's if you can't see the hypocrisy, then I don't know what to tell you. You're in there, you're praying together, you're brotherly love, relief, and truth. Brotherly love, relief, and truth. The brotherhood of mankind, but not those guys.
Wow.
Not those people, not people with a certain kind. I'm like, just get out of my organization. I'll tell you that right now. I don't treat that with any kind of politically correct language. I don't leave the gloves on or anything like that. You're not a Mason.
You're correct.
Yeah.
You're not. If you made these obligations to be a good man, true, be here for your brethren, and they believe something different, or they're from a different race, how can you call yourself a Mason if you're being a true racist?
Yeah. You have to bring out the old phrase, minnow, Mason in name only.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hate to be so mean to you, but I also don't hate it. So sorry. Yeah. But I demitted. I didn't demit terribly out of personal offense. And I do have, and I'm not claiming any kind of status or anything. I have less than 1% Congolese ancestry. We kind of know how that happened. I'm descended from slave owners and slaves, it turns out. We have good genealogical and genetic evidence of that. So, I have an extra reason to get a little honked off at that. I mean, there is no such thing as purity. It's just silliness. We're all Americans here, and, get along in lodge, or just don't go to lodge. Come on, guys. So.
And if I may jump on this, if you're experiencing that in that lodge, start traveling, and it makes you uncomfortable, which it should. Start traveling to other lodges and find your right home. You should never be stuck in a lodge that does not identify with what you believe. And I mean that in a way where it complements it, not that it always has to be the Robbie Frank's view on how a lodge should be. I'm saying you're a part of this interweb of brotherhood, right? The cement.
Yeah.
So yes, leave a lodge. If you're going through the lines and the past masters are just not open to anything, or they're not giving you the proper respect, and you're just going to become the worshipful master and sit in the chair while those guys run the lodge, what's the point?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
You're just a drone.
It's serious. And that's, everyone's looking, there's lots of books, lots of podcasts about why the fraternity's shrinking. Well, I've talked to my kids, and I talked to people my son's age. My son's 30. He's like, I don't want any part of that. And it's like, yeah, I get it, man. So, but one of the reasons I demitted at that point is I was busy with my military career. I was busy with lots of other things. I was like, I can't deal with this right now. Like, you shouldn't have to deal with your lodge.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I demitted. I got zero response from that lodge. Didn't get a demit letter. You're supposed to get a demit letter and all that stuff.
Wow.
And I went about my business. And then, so here's where the synchronicity comes in. Years later, I'm getting ready to retire from the military. I retired at the end of 21, I think.
Huh?
And 22. I can't remember. It's all a blur. I did 21 years in, and I was walking out of my office in Bowling Green, Kentucky, which is where I ended up living. It's a beautiful town. Go there. And I was just thinking, you know what? I'm probably getting to the end of this military career. I'm going to have more time. I could probably get back into Masonry and really roll my sleeves up and be part of the solution. I mean, I don't like to walk away from stuff that I see as a problem, but I couldn't deal with it at the time. I like a good fight. Let's go fix this. There's got to be someone else out there who thinks like I do. And the moment I was thinking that, I was walking out of the door of my office building, and my phone rings, and it's our good friend, our mutual friend, Brother Korn.
Ted
Korn, who is a mentor to many. Love that man. And he called me.
Out of the blue, right? This is like
the blue.
Like
and he never calls me.
What a synchronicity.
Oh, yeah.
And there's that.
Yeah.
And the first thing he said, aside from, John, shut up. Don't say anything. Listen to me. Because he knows me. I'm going to be, I'm stubborn as all get out. The first thing he said was, you need to get back into Masonry. And I was like, what? He said, now listen, you need to get back into Masonry right now. There's opportunities in there. There's things, we need you back. You need to get in right now. I'm like, all right, then. I mean, so I'm like, what are you doing in my head?
Can we dissect that for a moment? You demit from the fraternity.
Yeah. For years.
For an extended period of time, yeah.
For years. You knew Ted before you demitted.
Yeah.
How?
I had to do with Kosovo, another series of synchronicity. And how do you meet people? There's a
DMLA group in Kosovo.
It's weird.
It's weird. Geez,
I will tell you, there was a traveling Masonic lodge there. I never got to it because I was kept working way too much. 16-hour days, 7 days a week.
The military lodge, right?
And, well, I think it might have been contractors who worked. I can't remember who exactly ran the lodge or where their charter came from. But my buddy, he got off post a lot for his job, and he walked in there. It was before we left. We'd spent a year there, and we were getting ready to leave. And there was a tapestry with all the Masonic tools on it, and a big square encompass. It was beautiful. It was like gold embroidered tapestry. Yeah. And he walked in there and said, "Hey, my buddy would like that," and they gave it to him, and that hangs in my house right now. It was a very cool gift. Well, that was the man we met, my buddy Joe.
Yeah,
we met last night. Right. Interesting. Well, he was a young guy, and we had some very deep conversations over there in Kosovo. He was in his 20s at the time or so, and he wanted to be a Mason. So when you demobilize, it's like breaking up a family. We all go back to our home states and things. And, I went to Kentucky at that time. That's where I was living at the time. That's where I live now. And he's Ohioan. And he petitioned a lodge, and Ted became his mentor.
Yep.
And so that's how I met Ted, is through this young guy I met on deployment.
Right.
And
amazing.
It just worked out. And then that's how I got back into Masonry. It's nuts how all this stuff works. But I'm glad I did. And I did meet the right people. And there are a large amount of really good people out there who are like, look, we got to make a change. We got to turn a corner. We can't have this sort of racism and sort of, and not just that, the sort of old way things have been done.
Sure.
I know of and not to speak too disparagingly of anyone, but just as an example, there was there was an incident where a couple lodges were meeting in the same building. One of the lodges kind of made a mess, just spilling stuff and being weird. It wasn't great hygiene in the lodge.
Mm-hmm.
The other lodge made it a point to come on that lodge night to have a word with them about it. I'm like, okay, but did you come when any of our members were sick or in the hospital? Did you make it a point to come when our one guy was in a car wreck? Did you make it a point to do that? Why was it really important for you to come to berate someone, but you didn't think it was worth that effort to come and be with us when our brothers are sick or injured? Did you call them? Did you write them? No, you were worried about your lodge building. And man, there's a place for that, but where are your priorities?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I think we need to turn a corner in that. And I think podcasts like yours are helping do that. It's helping people think more out of the box. Helping people think that like this isn't about maintaining the building and having yet another chili cook-off and yet another pancake. I say Freemasonry, taking the world one pancake breakfast at a time.
Exactly.
But
it's true.
Anyway, that's where I am, and I'll stop complaining about that. But there's things to be fixed, but there are people fixing it, and that is the ray of sunlight in all of it. There are people who are on the same message and are like, we got to do something, or this is going to go away.
Well, and the other thing is too, is just by having, both of our podcasts, we're vastly different, so to speak, but we're both brothers. We're all brothers, right? Sure. Obviously, but it gives a different perspective to people that are non-Masons. I've had a lot of people, and believe it or not, during, just from the podcast and then, just being on Twitter or X or whatever, reach out to me and say, hey, just by watching you and actually watching your podcast too, Robbie, it gave me a better idea of what Masonry is. Like everybody has their own perception of Masonry. We're this, secretive group that is, a lot of people are like, oh, you're the Illuminati and all this, all the crap that we hear, right? The conspiracy stuff. But it's like when you hear people, can relate to people that are just real humans that are having conversations that could be potentially interested in some of the things that we are as well, right? Like from my side, the esoteric, the ufology, the non-human intelligence thing. It's like, well, why, there's room for that. There's room to be your own person, and I think that's awesome and enlightening in a little bit. And I think that's what helps people go, it's not just a bunch of old dudes having a pancake breakfast.
It is that, but in addition to that,
but in addition to that, you could be you. You could do things. You could, make it a part of your own.
Like someone told me when I joined the Scottish Rite up in San Jose, took me aside and he said, "This can all be yours." And I thought about that. What's that mean? It's like, no, when you join Freemasonry, if you're a young person and you don't like even the perception of Freemasonry, let's say, I've talked to, my son's friends and things like that. And they're like, no, it's old fogies. It's pancake breakfast. It's a little, a little too this. It's a little bit not enough that. It's like, well, get in and change it because it can be yours.
So well said, because it isn't, at the end of the day, it isn't John's fraternity, it isn't John's fraternity, it isn't Robbie's fraternity.
Right.
It's all of ours.
Yeah.
And you know what? Yes, we need to build bridges instead of walls with the different generations.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be able to, and this is really especially true. And this morning, as you guys knew, I was in a Masonic district in Ohio where I had to give a speech, and I was talking about articulating Freemasonry in a modern era. Being able, we can talk about Masonry all day. What about the non-Masons? Because how many times do we see men who exemplify what the fraternity is? But we're not soliciting,
mm-hmm.
All right.
But be able to have discussions of, oh, hey, Jeff, how you doing today? And he says, well, I was at my lodge and I was helping out in the community. I don't know. Do you know anything about Freemasonry? And they said, 9 times out of 10, they'll say, I know, I've heard of it. I just don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's your moment to talk about it. And it's so important for men's mental health in being here so that the enemies of Freemasonry, because in America, we do take this fraternity for granted.
Mm-hmm.
You never know what that conversation can do. And you can even go on and say, hey, I can't invite you to join.
Right.
You have to join on your own free will and accord. You have to knock on that door for yourself. But my lodge is having a dinner here next Monday. Did you want to come and meet some of the guys? And so many people walk out with a petition and start their
Yes,
journey.
yes.
Because after you get out of college and you're starting to have the family, how are you going to social and interact and still have that piece of
Look,
identity?
That's how you know it's not the Illuminati or something. Is that
100%.
we can't recruit you. We don't come get you. We don't ask you to join.
We don't tell you exactly how to believe.
Mhm.
We, it's not everybody's believing the same thing. Each lodge is different.
Oh, each person is different in each lodge.
Yep.
And that's why we have so many lodges. I think it's a beautiful thing. And I'm associated with a loose affiliation of 3 or 4 lodges, and we all love each other and we have joint things together. But we all like to run our lodges the way we like. And I'd like to propose too that maybe instead of to be one, ask one, or making good men better, how about this could be yours?
Well, that's
I love it
as a logo.
because literally, as I was just talking about the older men who need to listen to the new people coming in,
Mhm.
the younger men have to be able to put their blueprints on the table, show if they have an event or an idea and a concept, show them how to get from A to Z.
Yeah. And be respected.
Plan it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not be dismissed because that's not the way we've done it.
Correct.
Well, Freemasonry was an innovation when it was created.
And for the younger men, being open to feedback on how to make it better. Because if you can show them, then you can change this fraternity and make it what you want. It's worked for me for 13 years. I'm always sitting here, and John's always talking with me openly, and everybody else who's been on this podcast and whoever I've met. And I'm always sitting here like, man, not of new things, but in new ways. How can we reinvent this?
Well, I'll tell you something we did, and there was a very enlightened master of the lodge down in a town in Kentucky, and he said, "Hey, would you come do a talk?" I said, "Yeah, that's great." And he said, "What about this? What if we open the lodge to the public when you do it?" I'm like, "Great. Put it in recess, put it at rest, whatever you want to do, or don't even open it. Just have the building open. Invite the people who were thinking about petitioning, who were non-Masons, invite everybody, men, women, children, whatever, and have a subject, and speak on it." And I'll tell you what, we did that, and it was a huge success. We need to open our lodges up a little bit more, remind people we're part of the community, remind them that we're not secret, we're private, just like anything. If you walk into a major supermarket's boardroom, they're going to kick you out with security. Now, we won't even do that. We'll just stop what we're doing and talk to you.
Yep.
If you just happen to walk in what we're doing. We're not doing anything secret. We're doing something private. We conduct business. It's our finances. It's our paying the bills.
Yeah.
That's what we're up to. And the other reason for the secrecy on our initiations is that so we don't spoil it for you. It's an experience. And if you come in already knowing what the experience is going to be, then it's lame.
Mhm.
It's just a lame experience. That's really what it is,
Yeah, you don't want to put the stereotype in that, I'm just joining a business meeting. A Masonic meeting can be whatever you want it to be, but it has over time, people fall into grooves and structures of this is what we have to do because we've been doing it forever. When, and I just have to use my example for this when I was master. My first meeting of the month, because we meet bi-weekly, it was a business meeting. It was a long business meeting, but we got it all done. That second meeting of the month was a very short meeting. And then we opened it to a lecture series. And we had different presenters talking about all different topics. And we opened it to other lodges.
And that's the other thing is opening it. So the Masonic term tiled is where we keep things private. So tiled means the lodge is closed to the general public. That's really all that means.
Yeah.
And so we had this problem in the military intelligence world where we call it overclassification. There was a lot of information that didn't need to be classified, or it didn't need to be classified at the level it gets classified. But people are you're incentivized to classify it at a higher classification level because you don't want to be in trouble for accidentally releasing it or classifying it at a lower level, right? So there's a good incentive and good reasons to overclassify things, but you end up with a whole bunch of stuff that's so classified you can't get it to the average warfighter who needs the information because they don't hold the security clearance. We do that a lot with tiling our lodges. We'll hold talks and read papers and do presentations that are amazing and brilliant, but we'll do it in a tiled lodge. There's no reason you couldn't give it to the public as long as you're not discussing, private matters. And most of the papers I've ever heard in lodge are perfectly able to be given publicly. So, maybe we should do that or consider doing it.
Yeah, I agree.
and invite people and invite your detractors. If you got a guy you're arguing with online, maybe not in every case, but if it seems reasonable, he's got good arguments, he doesn't understand Masonry, he or she, invite them to a reading, invite them to a paper or a presentation, and be like, oh, or invite them to present. If they've got something to say, let them present. I'm all about that. Let's hear your opinion.
I think some of the hesitancy with that is you have in these charges that are said, you don't want to be, and this is uncoded in Ohio, so to us can be open to the public to listen to, or a public, a non-Mason could read. We're not supposed to lead ourselves into arguments with those who through ignorance will ridicule it, right? So abstain. Well, the problem is you don't have to be argumentative to enlighten somebody.
Yeah, listen. Let's listen to each other. If you want a detractor, or maybe let's just call it someone who doesn't understand Masonry, who's a questioner, you engage them, right? That's not an argument. That's engaging them. And you know what? If we're going to do that, then it has to be reciprocal. We have to engage with them and hear their real concerns. I've talked to a lot of people online who had real concerns. People in my family have real concerns. Like, what about this? What about this thing I heard? What about the Morgan affair? What about this? And you don't poo-poo them, and you don't dismiss them. Engage them with that and be like, well, that is real concern. And yeah, there are problems in Masonry.
Not perfect.
It's not perfect at all. We were saying last night that hospitals are where sick people are, not well people. And Masonic lodges are not where all the enlightened people hang out. It's where people who are trying to get better are. And you're going to have all kinds of, activities. You're going to have some people who just, they just aren't cut out to do it. You're going to have some people who get in trouble. You're gonna have some people who don't, but that's just everywhere in every church. And if you have a church member or parishioner who goes to jail, for example, do you shun that parishioner? You try to engage them. You try to help them. And it's like, what are we trying to do? Like, if we've got do you as the general public say, well, that entire church is full of bad people then, because that one guy did something wrong, But we seem to do it with societies like Masonry. One Mason does something wrong, we're like, there you go. I knew it. Masons were all diabolical and criminals.
And then
don't quote me on that.
And then you also have these people who think they're so smart that they hid a camera in a lodge and tried to expose the secrets. Well, I don't know which Masonic author said it in his book, but I can definitely, and credit to that Masonic author who said this. Listen, I could write a book about how to eat an orange. I could talk about how I peeled the orange. I can talk about how I pulled it apart, why I chose it, when I bit into it, feeling the mist of the orange on me, tasting the orange. Until you experience it, you have no idea about that orange or Freemasonry, because it's an internal journey of bettering yourself.
That's a great way to say it.
Thank you.
I agree with that, and I think also, I think people misunderstand, because this is a nuanced thing. I know a lot of people they don't really like nuance, but I'm going to say a nuanced sentence or two. There's obviously secret symbols, words, gestures, right? These are parts of the ritual that we don't give publicly. Well, they're all in Duncan's ritual. Sure. It's not important to me that you don't know them. It's important to me that I keep them secret, because that's part of the symbolic act of what I'm doing in initiation. Giving us secrets, that's just a symbolic thing. It's part of what we're doing. It's part of the rearrangement of the internal furniture. If you know it, great. I don't care, but I'm not going to tell you. That's what's important. And that's a real nuanced thing. It's like, well, why can't you tell me? I'm like, because I can't, but that doesn't mean you can't know it. Go read Duncan's ritual.
Yeah.
It's all in there.
Yeah. This is a big thing. Not every man could be a Mason.
Sure. 100%.
Right? It's only for those few who are truly seeking it and finding what the fraternity has to offer. Because there are secrets in the fraternity, and that's what builds our relationship.
And that's not to disparage anybody who's not on that path. I mean, a lot of people have different paths, and a lot of people just aren't on that path, and that's fine. I think we get a bad rap for maybe being, if we're a secret organization, we're on some high Phoenician tower and being condescending to the plebeian, the unwashed masses, the non-Masons, they'll never understand. It's like, no, it's not like that. I mean, you really have to take a big old spoonful of humility to look in the mirror of yourself and be like, wow, man, I need some improvement, and I am there. I'll tell you, as a Mason, I'm not like, I'm a Mason, therefore I am XYZ. It's like, I'm a Mason, which means, man, I got some work to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's the central symbolism, which I won't really talk about here, but I'll let someone experience if they become a Mason. Part of the central set of symbols is about that very thing. This is about taking you and doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
If anything comes out of this podcast for Michael and I on the All Square side, and I know this is like this for John as well with UFOs on the level, check it out.
Oh, yeah.
Is if I could be in an airport across the country reading a book and waiting for my flight, and some guy comes up to me and says, hey, brother, and I vet him to be a brother, and he sits down with me, and I'm just, my first thing to most every Mason, I mean, it's like, how did you join? I want to hear the origin story. And if somebody can look at me and say, I joined because I watched All Star, that
fantastic.
I'm like, get it.
Yeah.
Even if it's one.
I've actually had a 3, I think now, believe it or not. Three guys. Yeah. Thanks.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting. I mean, I actually wrote their home, like what came to be their home lodge, and said, hey, you know what, this guy, we've been talking back and forth for a while, and he's interested. And like I said, I don't know him personally. I know he's there, obviously go through your whole thing, but hey, he's interested in, give it a shot. And then there's a couple guys that it's interesting to see going from just, learning Masonry through me and through our, different, people, our world, and then, going through, and then it was really fun for me to like talk to them through each degree. Like, okay, you're under the apprentice. So what do you think? Oh man, Fellowcraft. Yeah. Master Mason. Oh my God. Just, and it's cool to see that those 3 different guys that went through that, and, and it was all thanks to, and I still keep in contact with them, and, they'll reach out, and it's cool. They're like, hey, thank you. Like, you changed my perception and you helped me get in the door. And, so I think it's really cool,
So because they believe in what you're doing. I think it's great.
Yeah. And I mean, and they honestly said, like, we had a different perception of what it was until we saw you, we talked to you about it. And so I thought that was cool just to do that, the thing for me is just, opening the doors for people to, let them walk in, That's the biggest thing. Like, you can let it, open it up and let them walk right through. And hopefully that's great,
Well, you're meeting them where they are too. I mean,
of course,
the digital landscape with you guys. I mean, this is where it's got to happen. This is where people are interacting. This is the new social. This is the the town center now.
Yeah,
and I like the idea of a symbolic lodge. This conversation lodge.
Yeah,
it's a great idea, and I think it's a great way to go. Would you mind if we took a quick break?
Yeah, let's take a quick break. Mike, can you give us a little bit of a pause, and we'll be right back. And we're back.
So we were talking earlier about misconceptions, right? Masonry and anything really, and this book really rocked my world. I saw you give this lecture. We talked about this before.
Thanks,
yeah.
That.
It's not above, not as above, not as below, not as above, not as below, which is hard because everybody in their free mind wants to think not,
as above, so below.
They want it. That's the thing that's been beat into their head for, centuries, right? Pretty much. And even when you tell people that's not the case, they just look at you like, no, you're telling me the sky's not blue, right? This is not so. I've based my entire, my belief system and everything on this, and people are, Hermetic, followers and stuff. And it's just amazing how you being a linguist and had a passion for it to be able to find the actual text.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, and
it's
do
part
the
of the miracle
work.
of the internet, too.
Well, of course, right? But have the wherewithal and the skill set to be an English speaker, and also a linguist in Arabic, to be able to translate that yourself and find the actual wording of it.
Well, thank you.
Different.
And I'll tell you, I may not be the final word on this. I don't claim to be. I hope to just start the conversation. Here's where the problem I saw. Here's how I got inspired to do this. For people who aren't familiar, you've probably heard the phrase "as above, so below." It's this sort of mystical, magical phrase. It comes from something we call the Emerald Tablet, which is a 15-line poem of Hermetic philosophy from somewhere probably pre-3rd century.
Okay. Yeah.
And Hermetic philosophy is a Greco-Egyptian sort of amalgam, a sort of a religio-philosophical set of ideas and a cosmology and things. So there's a distinction. There is original or from the era of antiquity, Hermetica and Hermeticism. Okay, so there's a set of texts we have from 300 BC, 380 that are considered Hermetic texts. They talk about Hermes Trismegistus. You've probably heard of this. Hermes Thrice Great, etc. But then that was studied in the Middle Ages a lot, especially when the Greek texts that had been lost to Europe for a while came through Baghdad. They were actually translated into Arabic, and they were saved essentially by the Arabic speaking world, the Arab scholars, by and large. And they started coming back into Europe in the Middle Ages, and then those were translated into Latin and other languages so they could be studied. And you get this sort of infusion of Hermetic thought into Western esoteric tradition. People who squint really hard at Freemasonry can see some Hermeticism in there.
Right.
Rosicrucianism, these sorts of vibes, right? So you'll see a lot of people say Hermetic. But here's the problem, is that in the late 1800s, there was this set of ideas coming out of Europe called New Thought or New Think. And that sort of became the New Age movement. And there's a whole set of language with that. And it was quasi-scientific. It was vibrations, it was frequencies, energies, crystals, right? You won't see that in ancient Hermetica, right? It just was a world they didn't know. They talked about nous, which was like the divine mind, spirit, knowable God, the unknowable God, these sorts of philosophical concepts. You don't see energies and things like that. But what happened after about 1900 is that just became Hermeticism. What you would consider even like received Hermeticism, like the Kabbalion, right? Beautifully written book, but it's not actual historical Hermetica. It's a new take. And it's been the gateway for people to study these ancient works, which I agree with. Study ancient philosophy, read the stuff. But if you go to the source material, that's where you find the Emerald Tablet, for example, which is just one tiny bit of the Hermetica. It's popular for a couple of reasons. One is it seems to have a balance. It has this universal feel to it. The sentences are well balanced. And this is where we get that phrase, as above, so below. And I argue that we don't actually. And the other thing is it became part, there's two parts to a work. This work is called The Secret of Creation and the Art of Nature. It's probably we can date some of the stuff in it. It's probably post first century. It claims to be written by Apollonius of Tyana, who lived in the first century. But there's problems with the text that make it clear that it wasn't first century. But anyway, in that text there are two things: The Secret of Creation, which is a big work, a multi-100-page book, and The Art of Nature, which is the Emerald Tablet. It's not called the Emerald Tablet. It was never called the Emerald Tablet. In the book, it's in the source material, which we have 9th and 8th century handwritten Arabic manuscripts, which is I'm using as my source material. These are the oldest sources we have for the Emerald Tablet. I'm using 3 different sources. Dr. Ursula Weiser in Germany started looking at these in the 1970s and compiled some academic versions. I used that as well. There's 40 extant versions. There's 40 handwritten manuscripts around the world in various forms of decay and readability, right? I've got 3 of them that I can access. I don't own them. That'd be crazy. But if you want to send me them,
send them.
So you go back to the oldest source text we have for this thing we call the Emerald Tablet. You find out a couple of important things. It wasn't called the Emerald Tablet. It was called The Art of Nature. It says that it said it right on the tablet. That Emerald Tablets were a general term, some would argue, for the soul. It's anything sort of sacred in Hermetic speak and Greco-Egyptian. Anything written by the gods was written on a blue or emerald or green tablet. That was a symbol, right? So we're not saying there is the Emerald Tablet, and we're certainly not talking about the Emerald Tablets, which is a book, right? The Emerald Tablets of Thoth or Thoth. That's just a book, and that's a modern book. It's a work of fiction by and large. Sorry, guys.
Is that where we get this mystical figure of Hermes Trismegistus?
Hermes Trismegistus is actually a historical figure in Hermetica, but when you translate the Emerald Tablet anyway, which is only one source of his name at the very end, you find out that it's not Hermes thrice great, which Trismegistus from the Latin translations. It's Hermes thrice wise, which incidentally, written in Arabic, is morphologically exactly like the phrase Hermes triangle of wisdom.
Huh.
Which is very interesting.
It is very
the
interesting.
word thrice and triangle are written exactly the same way. And it turns out in ancient Syriac, where this probably came from, it's the same as well. And it's written the same way. And I don't speak ancient Syriac, but I had to look up some things because this is probably either from Syriac to Greek or Greek to Syriac or several iterations of that, and then into the Arabic. And then in older translations, you find the Latin. And this is where we get eventually a paraphrase of a line that is incorrect, that was generally translated incorrectly. The incorrect translation, because of various reasons that I could go into about the nuances of Arabic, is the misunderstanding of a word, a key word, and the misunderstanding that Arabic doesn't write the present tense to be like am. It doesn't, it says is or am. It just omits that in the present tense, and it made medieval scholars make a few mistakes, and they had this phrase, and I have a copy of it here.
Yeah.
They would say, and my Arabic pronunciation is a little bit off. Inna al-a'la min al-asfal wa al-asfal min al-a'la. And they translated that as the above is like the below, and the below is like the above, which became as above, so below.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it doesn't say that. The word min, if you stretch the meaning really hard, you might be able to say something like, or as, you could say like father, like son, which is still not a direct correlation.
Mm-hmm.
It really means from. The above is from the below, and the below is from the above. It's reciprocal. It's reciprocal movement. And what that means to esotericists and stuff is I'll leave that up to them. But my point is that if we reduce the entire Hermetica to the Emerald Tablet, and we reduce the entire Emerald Tablet to this phrase that is also a mistranslation, a paraphrase of a mistranslation that was never in the work. It doesn't say as above, so below. It just doesn't. Then we think with that slogan that we just understand Hermetica, and it discourages people from actually reading the stuff, which you have to find. It's scattered all over. It's not all in one volume anywhere, but especially the philosophical Hermetica, not just the Corpus Hermeticum, but there's the Stobaean excerpts and various other excerpts that are out there. The Cori Cosmo, which is the version of the world. It's a very important Hermetic text. You can find it free online, open source. And I would argue that this, the Emerald Tablet, what we call the Emerald Tablet, is really just a condensed version of what Hermes is doing in that work, the version of the world. He's the one who ascends. He's the one who descends. Because if you read the Emerald Tablet, a lot of translations say like it ascends, it descends. You don't know what the hell they're talking about. Like what's ascending? What's descending? What's doing all these crazy things with these four elements? Well, when you understand how there was a real key word in here, it's amala. It is the past tense masculine. He worked the wonders from one, as all things were from one by a single move. And then you see a bunch of, I won't get too technical, but there's a bunch of attached pronouns. You could either read those it or he. Well, the whole thing makes sense when you just make it he. When you look that there's no reason to say it worked the wonders from one, which a lot of translations do.
Right.
It clearly says he worked the wonders from one. He did this. His father is the sun. His mother is the moon, because he was the father of talismans, blah, blah, blah. Gently and wisely, he ascends and descends. He surmounts everything. And then at the very end, you get this line, and I'll read it verbatim. This is my glory, and that is why I am called Hermes thrice wise. Why would it say it, and then Hermes says, and me? It just doesn't make sense. But when you read it in context, in the context of its finding, I think there's some understanding that it was, the idea is, the Emerald Tablet was found in a cave and stuff like that. Well, it's an allegorical story, and there's a larger allegorical story in The Secret of Creation and the Art of Nature that hasn't been translated directly from its original sources into English until I did it, which I'm working on. I'm working on translating that big book, and it's probably going to take me a few years. The Secret of Creation It's underway, but
since we've spoken last, you started.
Oh, yeah. And I think a year or more before I get, but in there is this larger story about where the Emerald Tablet came from. It's clearly allegorical. And I'll summarize.
Right.
Apollonius of Tyana is actually older. He goes to the statue outside of town. It's a statue of Hermes on a glass plinth. Okay. Mm-hmm. On the statue are written some words. On the plinth are written some words. And he just discovers it's a riddle. Mm-hmm. It's based on a lot of plays on words and stuff I won't go into. But everyone in the town had been looking for the secret under the feet of Hermes, the statue. And it's basically says, this is under my feet. But the word feet looks a lot like leg or legs in Arabic and I believe in the ancient Syriac. And so he got the idea, under my leg, under the plinth. So he starts digging, right? Now this is a made up story because Apollonius, as far as we know, didn't do this. This is a pseudo Apollonius. This is a story. He digs, he finds a crypt. The crypt he tries to go into, he lights a torch, he tries to go into the crypt, but there's a dark wind that keeps blowing his light out. He tries this over and over. I get a chill talking about this. Yeah. He tries over and over again. He finally sits down, overcome, and he says his eyes overcame him. He was either falling asleep from exhaustion or crying out of despair. Either way, he's spent. Yeah. And in that moment of despair, it's called a Hajj, an old wise man comes to him, and he recognizes it and it literally says, as his perfected self, comes to him, teaches him how to conceal his light in a transparent vessel. It's not described anywhere else. And then he enters the crypt. And in that crypt are two things: the secret of creation, which is a book sitting in front of what we assume is the corpse of Hermes, and the art of nature.
Separate book,
which is a separate thing, and that was written on a tablet of emerald, and then it had this poem, and that became the easiest part to translate because it's only 15 lines. That's why it's handed down to us. Everyone's like, "I'm not translating that book. That's nuts."
Yeah, and this was written when?
This was probably, we know it's post 1st century. I'm working from 8th and 9th century copies, probably 3rd century, 4th century, something like that. Mm-hmm. And what's important about this for esotericists is that, this is clearly a journey into oneself, an internal journey. And the Emerald Tablet, let's just look at the Emerald Tablet of the art of nature. It's not the starting point of your journey. It's not the cornerstone of esoteric practice. That was the result. And there were two things. There are two things you have to have: the secret of creation and the art of nature. That he took from the crypt and then became the famous Apollonius, the master of talismans, which we say about Hermes. Master of talismans. He becomes the enlightened and powerful. He discovers the power within. So it's actually the result of a lifetime of practice, not the beginning.
He becomes the alchemist,
essentially,
the master.
Yeah, he becomes like Hermes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which is that's sort of the objective of it. So it's interesting that we have this sort of mistranslation that's come down. You start seeing the law of correspondences only really spoken about in the late 1800s, and it was only talking about how animals appear like their behavior. So ferocious-looking animals behave ferociously. Docile animals seem to not be very ferocious. It was in a different context, and it wasn't until I would say it was actually in that I have a note here that you find the first incidence of law of correspondences in an 1875 book, The World's 16 Crucified Saviors by Kersey Graves, but he was actually talking about animals in this. And then it was 1908, the Kabbalion is what combined law of correspondences and as above, so below, and made that thing. That's a recently manufactured thing. That's within the last 100 and some years. That's not ancient wisdom. As above, so below is law of correspondences, but we think it is. I'm not saying that there is no law of correspondences. I'm just saying that the thing we call the Emerald Tablet isn't the source for that phrase. And we would do better to look at the source material and explore that and explore the ancient stuff and see what they were really saying. You find out it really just says something different. And it's in a completely different context too. Yeah. So, that's where I went with that.
Well, that was good. You took your skills that you honed, with the army and
crammed in my head.
They crammed into your head, in the intelligence community for that long and used it for something that you're passionate about.
Well, I did particularly use because my conversational Arabic isn't that great. I haven't been there. I used to live in Egypt for a short period of time, and my conversational Arabic got really good.
Right.
And then you don't use it, and it just, it's hard. So I used analytical techniques. I was a cryptologic linguist, so it was basically viewing what they call the target language, which is an unfortunate, term. The language you're studying, viewing it as a code, and then you decrypt it. And so that's sort of probably a pun that he pulled this out of a crypt. He decrypted.
That's good. I like it. Yeah,
I like to think,
Yeah.
But I encourage everyone to go to these. Go look online. Look at the Qatari Digital Library and look at the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, online versions. Look for The Secret of Creation and the Art of Nature, called Sira Khalik, if you're an Arabic speaker. The whole manuscript's on there. Go read it. If you're an Arabic linguist, go to it. See if I'm wrong. Yeah. But you'll find that it is extremely unlikely that it is the above is like the below. There's so many other phrases for like or as
that could have been used.
That could have been used. Actually, why would they pick the most obscure one that almost doesn't mean that?
Right.
But you could probably say, like father, like son, using that same word, but it still doesn't mean a congruence or a correlation.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It doesn't have that connotation. But it's just the state of Arabic academia in Europe. It wasn't great at the time. Consider this. The Arabic language didn't really start using punctuation until the 1900s. You had to really know the language to know it. The present tense verb to be is not written. Vowels aren't written. There's no capital letters. It's all cursive. There was no real Arabic dictionary to a European language until Hans Wehr dictionary the Germans made. I want to say that was late 1800s, early 1900s. I can't remember exactly, but it's modern times. There was the state of what they used to call Arabism, the study of the language, was pretty slim at the time. You had to know a guy who maybe knew some stuff. There's all these dialects, so you can see where mistakes were made.
Of course,
that's.
I think it's amazing that you did that, and I appreciate it, honestly.
Well, I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to get that out there.
No, it's great. I think more people should get into it and read it. It's a great book. I mean, it's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's interesting to see when we talked about, basically we came back from the break. It was just, people's perception of one thing, Masonry, whatever, get into, and how it could be easily switched, right? Yeah. Just some research, empirical research or spiritual research, both, right? I think it's part of a both thing. You kind of piggyback a little bit. I know you and I were talking last night about perceptions and how counterintelligence works, right?
Oh yeah.
Counterintelligence, I mean, is a hot topic, obviously, right now in the world of ufology, because there's been some prominent figures that were counterintel officers. Luis Elizondo was a counterintel officer, and he comes right out and says it. Yep. And he said, "I used to do that," and he's quoted as saying, I was tasked to do this into ufology, counterintel. But nobody knows what that means. Nobody knows what counterintelligence means, and nobody knows how that would be used inside of, take for example, ufology, or like this, this community,
or these organizations, What's he doing there? What's he doing at ATIP?
Yeah,
as a counterintelligence guy. Well, there's a couple explanations for that. One is, my experience in the military is that quite often it's just there's this dumb shuffle of manpower. I was trained as an Arabic cryptological. Well, I'll go back really quickly.
Yeah.
I was a M1 tanker, an Abrams tanker.
Right.
As soon as I got trained up just to be remotely proficient on that, I got attached to the Air Force as security forces at airports. So I stood around with a rifle for 2 years, and then I went back and trained as a scout, kicking indoors, leading my squad. And they said, "Hey, now that you're trained up as a scout, you're going to be an Arabic linguist." I'm like, "Okay, all right." I went and did that. 15 months at Defense Language Institute, 2 months of cryptology school. And then I had 2 months in Egypt, something like that. And as soon as I got remotely, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars of training at this point.
Yeah.
They're like, "You're going to go be a collection manager in Eastern Europe." And I'm like, "I don't even know what that is." I had to get
right.
I had to Google it. I'm getting field manuals. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. There's something that's a real basic called intelligence preparation of the battlefield. Every junior analyst learns it. I had no idea what that was. I had to read up on it.
And nobody was speaking Arabic where you went.
No one speaks Arabic there. It's nuts. So that's what I did. But that's just how the Army works. I tell people it's a lot less like Full Metal Jacket and more like MASH, if you remember that show. You order 5,000 tongue depressors, you get 200 bedpans. It's just the way it is. It's chaos, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so how did Luis Elizondo end up where he was? I'm no expert in his career or anything like that, but could just be that's just how it works. And there's also personnel mobility. I can apply for jobs in the Army. So I've held several what they call military occupational specialties, MOSs. Because I wanted to.
Right.
Some of them I was just like, well, I'm going to go do that. Or I'll just put in to go to a different unit because I think it's a better career opportunity for me or my family. You could have done that.
Yeah.
But what does counterintelligence do?
Yeah.
People hear that and they think, oh, information ops or spy or something. No, that's a totally different thing. Counterintelligence guys are there to detect surveillance and intelligence collection from adversaries. They're there to make sure the adversaries cannot collect on our forces. You want a Lou Elizondo there. You want him on your side.
Right.
People are like, oh, he's an intelligence spook or something. It's like, CI, they're special within even the intelligence community as defenders, and that's their specialty.
Right. So they're defending other collections on ours, right?
Yeah. Like we have an intelligence apparatus that does various collections. We're trying to get information.
Right.
And then our general forces has a posture where we try to obscure our information a little bit or make it hard for people to get. That's called OPSEC, operational security.
Right.
And that's, you and I do cybersecurity.
Right.
That's in the cybersecurity realm.
Yep.
And then there's information operations, which are to influence the adversary.
Right.
And which you almost never interact with them in things I've done.
Yeah.
And then counterintelligence is actively looking for the adversary's collection against you.
Right.
To actively protect the force.
Yep.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
And if there's CI folks out there want to correct, go ahead and let me know. But that's how I understand. I was never a CI guy.
Yeah. Right.
So I don't know.
I mean, you had experience being around.
Yeah. I mean, I worked with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I saw them do. They run around and, they're the ones who, if someone's, in your organization and they're spying or whatever, that's, they're the ones who come get you,
Yeah.
So I was deployed overseas. You didn't really want to see the counterintelligence guy show up at your door. You're like, oh man, this is at least gonna be a long interview or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're looking for moles. They're looking for leaks.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah. And they're looking for other nations or somebody trying to pull intel from our sources, right?
In my experience, that's what they've been doing. I was an analyst, so I was eventually I became an all source analyst, and that was one of those things where I voluntarily did that. I said I don't like crypto linguistics anymore because not that I didn't like the work, but the career opportunities weren't there. It's a very rarefied field, not a lot of jobs,
right? Not a lot of movement, probably.
If you change over to being what we call an all source analyst, which I really enjoyed too, then there's a lot more jobs because you're just generally an analyst. Go sit in that chair and analyze things. Okay, I'll do that. A lot more job opportunities, and that's what I did. More mobility. So, so I'm not really a CI expert or anything like that. But.
No, but it's just interesting to have that perspective of somebody, that was around it and part of it. Because everybody expects about, he's just a spook, he's letting us away. I mean, it could be, so depending on, your source and where you're looking at, like, so who is he protecting ufology from? Like, what is he doing?
I'm gled you bring that. I want to address real quick. This idea.
I'm just so impressed. Like, this is not something I hear every day. And I've heard of counterintelligence, but you just said it so well, how you both have just watching you guys as the casual viewer here and being able to kind of like understand. I'm like, oh wow, I never even thought about that.
Well, and you're probably not supposed to. You should probably sleep secure and comfortable. And that brings up this parallel between Masonry and the intelligence community,
which is a very
we've talked. There's a couple parallels. One is that there is a general perception there's something deeply unpatriotic or un-American that what's going on behind closed doors, and what are these people? So, let me give you. I like to reduce things to absurdity. Here's an absurd scenario. We have an organization, Freemasonry, and let's also say the intelligence community.
Okay.
And what we need are good people. And let's just say men and women for right now. Just make it generous. Good people to do good work. And we make sure we recruit from people who are not criminals. We do background checks. They do background checks. They check the heck out of you in the intelligence community. But Freemasonry checks you out. You aren't going to... We don't want felons and things coming in, and we want to have a nice organization. Where there's not like craziness going on. We don't want to be associated with illegal stuff. We don't want to do unpatriotic things. Yeah. We say the Pledge of Allegiance every lodge, right?
Yeah.
Army, it's Pledge of Allegiance. We wear a flag on our shirts. So 20 years goes by, and you're a patriotic American and doing the right things and helping the community, whether it's in the IC or in Freemasonry, and all of a sudden the people in charge open the door and you're really evil, and we're like, ha. Do you think we're really the right people to do that with? We've spent 20 years making sure that you don't give a traffic ticket.
Yeah.
At least in the intelligence community. I'm like, DUI gone, you're gonna lose your clearance. Anything gone, you're losing your clearance.
Right.
So we're gonna make sure you are a good person who's patriotic and wants to defend other people, and the same in Freemasonry.
Mm-hmm.
But what? At the very top levels, it's the devil.
Yeah.
We're like, come on, man. Now
Right.
go spy on Americans. We're like, I was just waiting for that opportunity. That's absurd. That's absurd.
Here comes a whole new genre of conspiracy theorists coming out.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't that what people? These Freemasons, they get in, and what are they really doing? Like, what's the intelligence community really doing? Well, most of us are overworked. When I was in, we were overworked. We worked in cube farms. It's nothing sexy or exciting.
Right.
Acres of cube farms where it's just people just going, just nugging away at computers.
Yeah.
That's who's defending the country, along with the shooters and the trigger pullers and the door kickers.
Yep.
And they're just as dedicated, and they come from those. I mean, I came from an armor background, a tank background.
Right.
If I were in the intelligence community, which I'm not anymore, if I were in that, and they said, okay, well, now what we want you to do is break the law, I'd tell them to go stuff it.
Right.
And,
you're not going to do that.
They are. I mean, there's damn near nobody in charge in the army. That's what people don't realize. Like, isn't it controlled? I'm like, no. No one knows what's going on.
No.
Veterans write in.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, basic training is all you see on TV, right? And the news. And they're yelling at, it's very structured. Like, it's structured. That's the military. No. As soon as that's over, you're like, where am I going? Where's formation? What the hell? Where's my equipment? Who do I see? What the hell? When are we deploying? We're not. We are again? I don't know. That's been 21 years of my life. What was that? So this idea that they're going to,
there's this big master plan going on, and there's this movement.
It's all got to be funded. It's all got to go through defense travel system. You guys who know DTS.
So many cogs in the machine turning slowly for the big unveil. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's a bureaucracy, So that's what I say about that. But there are other parallels too, and I can say that without giving away anything that's violates any of my obligations, Masonic or otherwise. Because I'm still beholden to. I can't give all secrets or anything. I certainly wouldn't.
Right.
The idea is like. There's you get read on to a program, it's called. So when you get a certain clearance level, there's programs and there's need to know. Do you need to work on that? Great. Read you on, which means we're going to swear you to secrecy. We're going to tell you the penalties if you break that. And then we're going to tell you about the program. So you sign a lot of papers and you sign your life away. It's like, yes, I promise to walk myself to prison if I divulge these secrets, right?
Right.
And a lot of that language, and I won't say the specific language, but a lot of it is Masonic.
That's
that
interesting.
I've seen in read-on documentation. It's pulled right from ritual. Because we have symbolic oaths and things like that.
Yeah.
And you'll see some of the exact phrasing, and that shocked me.
That's pretty amazing.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, coming from, our country was founded by predominantly a lot of Masons, and if you ever, rituals have been a part of our country since its began. I mean, Mitchell Horowitz's book, what is it called? Occult America? I want to say that's the book.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mike.
Something like that.
He kind of goes into like how these like rituals have always been kind of playing a part. Whether it's farming, whether in like the Masonic terminology, even code and military for Masonry. Yeah.
Military is full of ritual, and that's why a lot of former military get into Freemasonry. There's a woman's lodge in Washington D.C., and I think it's correct me if I'm wrong, anybody who's listening, but I think it's predominantly military and former military. That structure and the ritual and everything that's encoded. If you've ever been in the military and you know that formations are a kind of pageantry and a kind of ritual. Change of command. Every time there's a change of command, there's a flag, a guidon, it's called. It has to be moved a certain way. It has to be handled a certain way. You have to stand a certain way. Certain numbers of steps. Songs are played at a certain time. People give speeches at a certain time. It is all highly choreographed, and it's a ritual that means that the command has officially been shifted to another person, and that person now has the authority over this unit.
Right.
And you must go through that ritual. So, I mean, it's just important to humans, I think, regardless of your organization.
Yeah. The tie-in is amazing. I mean, we were talking last night, I just blew my mind that actually verbatim almost some of the rituals that we have that are tied into the oath.
That's incredible.
And it could be that was lodged into the person's head when they were writing.
Could be.
Someone had to write it.
Right.
Sure,
it's just like, yes, that's how you write an oath.
Right.
Or
Right.
it could have been,
Yeah.
it could have been more intent, but there's no way to know. These are anonymous authors.
Wow, it's
Yeah.
amazing. It just takes the love of my fraternity to a whole nother level, right?
Yeah.
Because seeing it play a part in our country,
Mhm. In the
it's just-
protection of our country.
in
Yeah.
the protection of our country,
And defense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and how we, the micro and the macrocosm. I mean, that's just blow my mind.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So I'm not saying that, oh yes, everyone's doing everything the right way. There's certainly bad actors. There's
Of
certainly
course.
people doing stuff, and there's certainly people trying to push the boundary of what's legal and what's not. But man, we're told in basic training that you don't follow illegal orders. You have an obligation
Mm-hmm.
to disobey unlawful orders.
Yeah.
They have to be both lawful and moral.
Well,
And that doesn't change. And then when you get into the intelligence community, there's a number on the wall of every skiff to call the inspector general. There's, if you see, there's something called intelligence oversight. It's a whole program
Mhm.
that if you are being asked to do something illegal, or you think you see something illegal, like using military intelligence assets on U.S. persons, which includes U.S. companies, you need to report that. And there's a separate chain for that.
Well,
Right.
there's also, which I've never experienced, but there is a Masonic trial period if somebody does something wrong,
Right.
right? And there is a tribunal of 3 dignitaries, and I also know that there is a tribunal in the military. Is that something that still gets conducted when things go awry?
Well, the courts martial, you're talking about
Yeah,
court
kind of
martial?
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're under, so you're not only a citizen of the United States when you're in the military, and you're beholden to all the local laws and then the Constitution, but you're also additionally beholden to the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the UCMJ. It's another set of laws. And when you violate those laws that are purely military, there's a court martial, could be a court martial.
Sure.
But a court martial is also your right as a soldier. It's your right to be heard.
Got it.
It's not always a bad thing. Oh, you're getting court martial. It was being done to you. It's like, well, I have a right to say my part,
Right.
say why I did or didn't do. Most things are called non-judicial punishment, NJPs. That means the command makes a decision like, you screwed something up. Now you're going to fill sandbags for a day. Oh, that sucks.
Right.
Or just, if it's a security clearance related thing, we're going to pull your clearance for a while, and then we're going to re-adjudicate, where they set it in front of a panel and they say, was this person able to get their clearance back? That sort of thing happens. I've never been a party to that, but I've heard of it.
Okay.
But basically there's ways to make it not a court deal if it's a minor thing, like you just screwed something up, which happens, but it's got to be corrected. You screwed a thing up, you left the thing open, you did the wrong thing. There's going to be like, you got to fix that, and now it's going to suck for you for a minute, but then it'll be fine. You're trying to train soldiers. You're not trying to get people in trouble.
Right.
Right. But if you intentionally do something wrong and they catch you,
Of course, you're out. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Listen, I know you have to get on the road,
Yes.
but
do.
we need to be plugging your books. And can you give us just an insight of what your first book was about?
oh gosh, the Song of God
Yeah.
right here. I mentioned before the Bhagavad Gita really spoke to me, but the language can be really off-putting to people. There's a lot of, in any translation of the Bhagavad Gita, there's a lot of Hindu cosmology. There's lots of long words. I found a lot of it hard to read, even really good translations, even though it's a very beautiful, shockingly compact spiritual story in this.
Mhm.
I decided, so the original was set in a battlefield in ancient India, and it was a chariot driver named Arjuna, and he was lamenting this battle. He's got to go out and do this terrible thing.
Mhm.
He's in between the two lines there, and he's talking to his chariot driver, who is actually Krishna, an avatar of the divine, right?
It's God.
And God, essentially. And this is what this book is a long conversation between them in this chariot. And I said, why can't I just put this in an M1 tank in the first Gulf War between the two lines on opening night before the ground war kicked off, where the tank commander is talking to this avatar of the divine who's down in the tank driver's hole, and they're having this exact same conversation, but I put it in as well as I could in Western Judeo-Christian terminology and Masonic terminology, stuff that follows the Western traditions using those. It's not going to be a congruent one-to-one. It just isn't. But this is the best shot. I want it to be readable and accessible to an American audience.
Right.
Your conversations between the two soldiers and the soldier who's questioning everything to the soldier that has the answers and talking to him, I picked up very early on. I'm like, this is like a divine character archetype who's like telling them how it is, right? And it really reflects kind of in the biblical verses of the story. I believe it was Job who's questioning God about stuff and how, God's telling him like, you were just so like not insignificant, but there's a bigger thing at hand. I believe that's the story of Job.
Get out of yourself.
Yeah, I don't believe it was that or Lot. I'm trying to remember, but
read it. It's great. If you don't read mine, which is on Amazon, plug. But go get the Bhagavad Gita. There's tons of different translations. I prefer the one with Aldous Huxley's intro. Just read it. It's a great book. Don't be scared. Go get it.
But this is easy and approachable. I mean,
That's super easy.
It's great.
It's in modern American English.
Yeah. With the same message, the core message of all of it. It's amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a book that changed my life, I would say.
I love it. And we appreciate you being on the show with us.
Yeah.
I was going to give you a final question on, what you want to tell the audience about Masonry and your experience. Like, what would you say to the non-viewer? But I actually want to pivot and say, I want to talk about faith and atheism.
Okay.
Closing us out.
Yeah.
Because you had a bout with being an atheist for a moment.
I claimed to be an atheist for a really long time, and I still do to most people when they talk to me.
Go on.
When they talk to me about religion, I say, "Well, I'm an atheist," because
you just don't want to have the conversation.
It's extremely tiresome.
Oh, it is,
because like I said about nuance is that I get people who've approached me recently at work. It's this: when people approach you with an agenda, when people approach me with an agenda, I won't speak for anyone else.
Sure.
I don't like it. And it's not about it. It's like, I'm interested in you and what your perspective is when they approach you. It's, I really want to find out, are you like me? And if you're not, I would like you to be like me. And that bothers me. And so I'm just like, I'm an atheist. But what I will say is, like we alluded to earlier, is that atheism, I think it gets a bad rap. I see a lot of dismissive thing. Oh, just an atheist or poor atheist. Or like there's something missing from your life, or there's something gray and awful. It's like, no, atheism is a kind of mysticism. I'd argue. It's that in order to transition from one kind of thinking to another, whether you want to call that a sort of a mundane, sort of in your own head kind of thinking, to maybe an esoteric trying to work towards a transcendental kind of thinking, there's a transition where you have to reject something. And if you grew up with a certain story or a certain set of values, a certain set of rituals, that rejection period is a very bold move. And that's why I say, you read people like Spinoza. We've discussed Baruch Spinoza. Here's an atheist, but what I could tell people, and I love this phrase, that I am simultaneously the most and least religious person you'll ever meet. And that's what Spinoza said, or was said about Spinoza, that he was simultaneously, he was all about religion and religious philosophy, but he's probably not thinking what you're thinking. And that's what a lot of people ask, like, do you believe in God or something, for example? A lot of people are really asking, are you like me and can I trust you? Let's just ask that question if that's what we want. So if people ask me, I'm like, no, I'm probably not like you. And if you really want to know what I'm thinking or saying, first of all, buy my books. But I'll have that discussion with you. But if your objective, which I can sense, if your objective is to get me to do the religion or the practice that you want me to do, then I have no time for you.
Right. That makes sense.
So how do you feel about the correlation, the foundation of faith, spirituality, faith, whatever you want to put it in there, and as a foundation of the fraternity going into it?
Oh man, that's a really good question. I think the fraternity has one of its tenets is to any person with a belief in a higher power.
Right. Yeah.
We have to really define what belief is. I think that's something that bothers people. Like, is that just taking on face value without evidence? Or is that a kind of knowing, like a Gnostic knowing? Or is it a suspicion? It could be all of that. It could be like an acknowledgement even. I think Freemasonry goes on acknowledgement. Like, do you acknowledge that there's probably something more powerful than yourself, whatever that may be? Yes, because there are Muslim Freemasons, there's
Jewish, Hindu, Native American.
Because it's supposed to be a multi-faith. I argued once, I wrote in, I think it was Scottish Rite Journal, that my definition of Freemasonry was Omnism. Because if you notice in the ritual, Freemasonry is left undefined.
Yeah.
It's a bit weird.
Yeah.
I think intentionally, I think by design. I posited that it was an early form of Omnism, which is a more recent term. So they didn't have the term 300 years ago. It came from a poet, I think, in the maybe the I think it's 1900s, I think. The idea that if you look at faiths around the world and throughout history, I say read Charles Eastman's Soul of the Indian. It's Eastman from Eastman Kodak,
right?
Was Native American, and he tried to write what Native American spirituality was before Columbus, pre-Columbian.
Wow,
it's an amazing little thin book.
Really,
go get that. But when you look at all these things across time, you start seeing an overlap. And I say it like this: the truth, could it be known? Is it out there? I don't know, but think of it like a box, and it's casting a shadow, and the shadow is the only thing you can see. And the lines aren't going to be right. None of the angles in the shadow are going to be 90 degrees. You get an idea. And if you keep looking where all these shadows overlap, there might be some sense of what that truth might be. I suppose that's how I see Freemasonry. And going into Rosicrucianism, if you're into that sort of thing, it gives you license to study other things.
Yeah,
I agree.
You know,
we could be here for hours, literally talking. You got to get on the road. We are, so grateful for you coming up. This has to be another episode in the future, getting us all three together.
I'm grateful for you guys too. And let me just say one more thing before I hop on the road. I have a couple dates written down. If people want, I've got a couple things coming up.
I'm really excited about the translation you've been working on.
Dude,
yeah, we'll have to definitely get another episode.
I'm working on some fiction that's going to be Hermetic. It's going to be nuts. That's going to be years down the road.
It's going to be the new Hermetica.
The new Hermetica.
new Hermetica.
No, I did write it's called the title of the book was, I have it right here. I wrote it kind of as a project. It's out there in the ether somewhere. It's called Pseudo Hermetica for the 21st Century. It's fake Hermetica. There's an exercise in writing styles. If you want to read some weird stuff,
cool.
Go read some weird stuff.
I like it.
And also, Temple of Masonic Order, the Wilmshurst. Go get that for your lodge. I think it's a good place to just hand that to new candidates. But October 11th this year, I'll be speaking at Sophia Lodge number 767 in Salisbury, North Carolina. That's their premier traditional observance lodge. Their TO, if you know what that is. Worshipful Master Sean Bradshaw, he's great, invited me over there. We're going to talk about not as above, not as below at that lodge. I believe that's a tiled talk, but they could correct me if I'm wrong. We'll come back with a correction. And then November 14, 15 at the SRICF High Council in Louisville, we have a book signing for the Not as Above, Not as Below. And we're going to be talking about, I'm going to be giving a presentation on writing for Rosicrucian research.
Interesting.
So, it's going to be really nuts. It's going to be nuts. So it's going to be a learning environment, and we're going to try to get some practical hands-on experience on how to write these papers. And, and for Freemasons too, those people are Freemasons first. Mm-hmm. They could take that back to their lodges and really work on their research. We're trying to elevate the whole floor of everything.
I love it. I love it so much. John, any final words?
Thank you for doing everything that you do, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys. I believe in what you do, and thanks for having me. This has been fun, and let's do this again.
Oh, of course.
Of course.
Yeah. Anytime you want. The floor's open.
Same.
Yeah,
I can't speak for Michael, but I believe we can get him back into the studio.
Get him back, right? I think Mike's cool with it. Yeah.
Listen, we've talked about so much. Your parting words to that guy who's watching, that's into symbolism, into esoteric, feels kind of lost in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to them to get them on the path?
Oh, man.
Of the fraternity?
Look, if you're a young person and you're having these ideas, and like a friend told me, and I think we discussed, is that altars will pop up in everyone's bedrooms when they start looking and they start seeking, and they're looking at books, or they got some tarots, or what do I do? Get online and look up Freemasonry, and then whatever your state is. Go ahead and Google Freemasonry or Grand Lodge of, and then whatever state. If you're Ohio, Grand Lodge of Ohio, Freemasonry. Go to their official website, send them an email, and just say, can I talk to someone at the local lodge? They will put you in contact, give you a tour of the lodge, talk to you about it. You might say, no, it's not for me, and that's cool.
Yep.
But they will take the time to talk to you, and that's what I recommend. Contact us online.
That's my brother, celebrated author. Check out his books, John Gilbert. Co-piloting with me, the one and only host of UFOs on the Level, John Majerowski. Check out that podcast. I'm your host, R.L. Franks, and you are all square. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, dude.
Hey, R.L. Franks here. Thanks again for watching today's episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, if you believe someone can benefit from the message that we provided on today's podcast, send it over to them. You may inspire them.